Chosen one, something has been happening to you lately. And no, it isn't what most people think. You are not becoming cold. You are not becoming antisocial. You are not losing your ability to connect. The truth is far more uncomfortable than that. You are beginning to outgrow a version of yourself that carried you for years. And nobody warns you how painful that process feels. Because from the outside, your life may look exactly the same. You still wake up in the same bed. You still answer messages. You still go to work. You still smile when people expect you to smile. But inside, something has shifted. A quiet distance has appeared between you and the life you once recognized. Maybe you felt it while sitting with friends. Everyone is laughing. The conversation flows. Nothing is technically wrong, yet somehow you feel miles away. Not because you dislike them, not because you're better than them, because a strange part of you keeps whispering, "I don't belong here anymore." And that thought scares you, because these are people you've known for years. People who witnessed parts of your journey. People who once felt like home. So why does their presence suddenly feel unfamiliar? Why do conversations that used to energize you now leave you exhausted? Why do places filled with memories suddenly feel empty? Why do you keep feeling as though you're standing in a room that still belongs to your past, while something inside you is already walking toward the future? Chosen one, stay with me, because what you're experiencing is not loneliness. At least not in the way most people understand loneliness. This is something deeper, something few people ever talk about. There comes a moment during transformation when your old identity begins to loosen its grip. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly, like autumn leaves releasing from a tree branch. And at first you barely notice it. Then one day you wake up and realize you no longer react the way you used to. The things that once consumed your attention don't hold the same power. The arguments, the drama, the need to prove yourself, the endless chasing, the desperate need for validation. Something about it feels heavy, and that's when the confusion begins. Because your mind keeps asking questions, your soul has already answered. What's wrong with me? Why don't I enjoy the same things anymore? Why am I pulling away? Why do I feel disconnected? But perhaps the better question is this. What if you're not disconnecting from life? What if you're disconnecting from a version of life that no longer reflects who you're becoming? That possibility changes everything. Think back for a moment, not to your biggest successes, not to your happiest memories. Think about the hardest years, the years nobody fully understood, the years when survival became your full-time job, the nights you stared at the ceiling, unable to explain the weight sitting inside your chest. The days you showed up smiling while quietly falling apart. The disappointments, the betrayals, the losses you never properly grieved. The expectations you carried because everyone assumed you were strong enough to handle them. You survived all of it. But survival leaves marks, not always visible ones. Sometimes the deepest scars are the identities we build to protect ourselves. The people pleaser, the overachiever, the rescuer, the one who never asks for help, the one who keeps everyone else comfortable, the one who learns to hide pain behind productivity. For years these versions protected you, they helped you survive. But now something unusual is happening. You no longer need them. And that creates a strange kind of grief. Because when an old identity begins dying, it doesn't disappear quietly. It fights for survival. It whispers familiar fears. Stay where it's safe. Don't change. Don't disappoint people. Don't become difficult. Don't outgrow anyone. Don't take up space. And for a while, you listen. Most people do. Because staying familiar feels safer than becoming unknown. But eventually, something inside you becomes too tired to keep pretending. Too tired to shrink. Too tired to perform. Too tired to carry roles that no longer fit. And that's when transformation truly begins. Not with excitement, not with confidence, but with exhaustion. Deep exhaustion, the kind that reaches your nervous system. The kind that makes you realize you cannot keep living the same way. You cannot keep abandoning yourself just to be accepted. You cannot keep betraying your own instincts. You cannot keep carrying emotional weights that were never yours to carry. And the moment you realize that, everything starts changing. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing people who constantly pull away. You stop explaining yourself to those determined to misunderstand you. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop fighting for seats at tables where your presence is merely tolerated. And here's where things become difficult, because when you stop overextending yourself, some people disappear, not because you've done something wrong, because the relationship depended on access to the version of you that no longer exists. That realization hurts, more than most people admit, because part of you wants to believe everyone will grow with you, that everyone will celebrate your healing, that everyone will support your evolution. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes growth creates distance. Sometimes healing reveals incompatibility. Sometimes becoming yourself means losing people who were only comfortable with the version of you that required less from them. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. The silence, the empty spaces, the unanswered messages, the gradual realization that your circle is changing. For a while it feels like loss. And maybe it is, but loss is not always punishment. Sometimes loss is simply evidence that your life is making room for something new. And that is where many chosen ones make a mistake. They panic. They rush to fill the silence. They return to old environments, old habits, old relationships, anything that makes them feel familiar again. But what if the silence isn't your enemy? What if the silence is the bridge? What if this uncomfortable season is not evidence that you've lost your way, but proof that you're finally leaving a path that was never yours? Because something remarkable happens in silence. You begin hearing yourself again, not the version shaped by expectations, not the version built from survival, the real one, the voice beneath all the noise. And once that voice becomes clear, there is no going back, because the next stage of your transformation isn't about losing people. It's about discovering who you are when nobody is telling you who to be. And what happens next is where everything changes. And what happens next is where everything changes. Because the moment you stop asking, "Why am I losing people?" you begin asking a far more important question. Who am I becoming? Chosen one. Most people never reach this point. Not because they aren't capable, because the truth waiting here feels too uncomfortable. The truth is that some chapters of your life were never meant to last forever. Not the friendships, not the relationships, not even certain versions of your dreams. We are taught to believe that permanence equals success, that if something ends, it failed. But life doesn't move in straight lines. Life moves in seasons, and some seasons are designed to end, even when we beg them to stay. You can feel this happening, can't you? There are moments now when you look back at your old goals and feel strangely disconnected. Things you once prayed for no longer excite you. Things you once chased no longer matter. At first, this creates panic. Because if the old dream dies, what replaces it? If the old identity fades, who are you without it? And that's when many people mistake transformation for crisis. Because from the outside, they look similar. Both involve uncertainty. Both involve discomfort. Both involve loss. But there is one critical difference. A crisis takes energy away from you. Transformation asks you to release what was already draining it. The problem is that release rarely feels good in the beginning. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for 10 years. Every day, every season. Eventually, your body adapts. The weight becomes normal. Then one day someone removes it. You would expect relief, but at first, you might feel unstable, unbalanced, disoriented. Because your entire nervous system learned how to function under pressure. Without that pressure, everything feels unfamiliar. This is exactly what happens when old emotional burdens begin leaving your life. You don't immediately feel free. You feel strange. You feel exposed. You feel uncertain. And because uncertainty feels uncomfortable, many people run back toward what hurt them. Not because it was healthy, because it was familiar. That is one of the most dangerous traps during awakening. Mistaking familiarity for alignment. Just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it belongs in your future. Sometimes familiarity is merely evidence of repetition. The same patterns, the same wounds, the same lessons wearing different faces. And deep down, you already know this. You have noticed the patterns, the relationships that begin differently but somehow end the same. The situations that seem new but create familiar pain. The promises that sound different but produce identical disappointment. For years you may have wondered why. Why does this keep happening? Why do the same lessons keep appearing? Why do the same emotional wounds keep reopening? The answer is simpler than most people realize. Life repeats what the soul has not fully understood. Not as punishment, as invitation. Every recurring challenge is asking the same question. Have you learned to choose yourself yet? Not selfishly, not arrogantly, but honestly. Have you learned to trust your instincts? Have you learned to respect your own boundaries? Have you learned that your worth isn't something other people get to vote on? These questions become unavoidable during transformation. Because the universe has an interesting way of exposing what still controls you. If approval controls you, people will disappoint you. If validation controls you, recognition will remain inconsistent. If fear controls you, opportunities will require courage. If comfort controls you, growth will demand discomfort. Not because life is against you, because life is trying to free you. Chosen one, there is something else happening beneath the surface. Something many people overlook. You are grieving, not necessarily another person, not necessarily a relationship. You are grieving the version of yourself that carried you this far. And that grief is real. Maybe nobody talks about it. Maybe nobody sees it. But it exists. You are saying goodbye to old coping mechanisms, old beliefs, old identities, old definitions of success, old versions of love, old ways of measuring your value. That kind of grief cannot be rushed. And if you've been feeling unexpectedly emotional lately, this may be why. A song hits harder than usual. A memory appears out of nowhere. A random moment makes your eyes fill with tears. Not because you're weak, because something inside you is processing years of emotional weight. For so long you were focused on surviving. You never had time to feel. Now the feelings are catching up. And honestly, that's a good sign. Because healing doesn't begin when pain disappears. Healing begins when pain finally feels safe enough to be acknowledged. For years, your nervous system may have been operating in survival mode, always preparing for the next disappointment, always expecting the next problem, always scanning for danger. Even during peaceful moments, you became so accustomed to carrying tension that relaxation felt unsafe. Maybe that's why rest feels uncomfortable. Maybe that's why silence sometimes makes you anxious. Maybe that's why you struggle to trust good things when they finally arrive. Because part of you still expects everything to fall apart. But listen carefully. The version of you that expected disaster was trying to protect you. Respect that version. Don't hate it. Don't judge it. It got you here, but it cannot take you where you're going. The next chapter requires something different. Not hypervigilance, not constant self-protection, not emotional armor. It requires trust. And trust is difficult when you've been disappointed before, especially for chosen ones, especially for those who have spent years carrying invisible burdens. You learned early that strength was necessary. You learned how to keep moving even when exhausted. You learned how to smile while hurting. You learned how to survive. But now life is teaching you something entirely different. How to receive, how to soften, how to stop fighting battles that already ended, how to stop carrying responsibilities that were never yours, how to stop proving your worth through suffering. That lesson may be the hardest one yet, because many people secretly build their identity around struggle. They don't realize it. But they've become attached to being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who carries everything, the one who sacrifices, the one who saves everyone else. Then healing arrives. And suddenly, they're faced with a terrifying question. Who am I if I'm no longer struggling? Who am I if I don't have to save everyone? Who am I if my value isn't tied to sacrifice? And that's where your next breakthrough is hiding. Not in becoming more, in releasing what was never truly you. The masks, the performances, the endless proving. Because the strongest version of yourself isn't the one carrying the most weight. It's the one who finally knows what belongs to them and what doesn't. And very soon, life is going to test this understanding. A situation is approaching, not to punish you, to reveal how much you've changed. The old version of you would react automatically. The new version will pause, observe, choose differently, and that single decision will quietly confirm something you've been unable to see until now. You are not the same person anymore. Not even close. But before that moment arrives, there is one final illusion that must break. One belief that keeps countless chosen ones trapped between who they were and who they are becoming. And once you see it, you will never look at your journey the same way again. And once you see it, you will never look at your journey the same way again. Because the illusion that has been controlling your life for years is not failure, it is not fear, it is not even self-doubt. The illusion is this: you still think becoming your highest self will feel like gaining something. But most transformations begin by losing things. Chosen one. Nobody tells you that growth can feel like subtraction. Less certainty, less validation, less belonging, less noise, less distraction, less certainty about who stays and who leaves. At first it feels like life is taking things away. Then one day you realize something profound. Life wasn't removing blessings. Life was removing interference. And suddenly, the entire story changes. Think about the last few years. How many situations did you desperately try to save? How many relationships did you fight for? How many doors did you force open? How many times did you exhaust yourself trying to preserve something that was already ending? Now, ask yourself something difficult. What happened after it finally ended? Really think about it. Not the first week, not the first month. What happened after enough time passed? You survived. More than that, you adapted. More than that, you evolved. Many of the things you once feared losing eventually became the very reasons you grew. And that's what the old version of you could never understand. The old version thought safety came from holding on. The new version is discovering that safety comes from trusting yourself enough to let go. That shift changes everything. Because when trust replaces fear, your entire relationship with life begins to change. You stop seeing endings as threats. You start seeing them as information. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" You begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" And that question opens doors that force never could. Chosen one. There is a reason you have felt increasingly disconnected from certain environments. It's not because you've become negative. It's because your awareness has expanded, and expanded awareness creates friction. The things that once distracted you no longer distract you. The conversations that once entertained you now feel repetitive. The approval you once chased now feels strangely empty. You are seeing behind the curtain. And once you see behind the curtain, you cannot pretend anymore. That is why awakening often feels lonely. Not because nobody loves you, because fewer people understand the version of you that is emerging. And that can be painful. especially if you've always been the person who tried to fit in. But fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. For years you may have confused the two. Fitting in requires adjustment. Belonging requires authenticity. Fitting in asks you to become what others expect. Belonging allows you to become who you truly are. Many chosen ones spend half their lives fitting in. Then, one day, they become exhausted. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally, existentially. The performance becomes too heavy. The mask becomes too difficult to wear. And eventually something inside says, enough. Not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. Enough. Enough pretending. Enough shrinking. Enough apologizing for your growth. Enough making yourself smaller so others can remain comfortable. That moment is sacred, because that moment marks the beginning of real freedom. And freedom often arrives disguised as discomfort. Why? Because your nervous system has been trained by familiarity, not necessarily by truth. This is why some people feel guilty when they finally start healing. Read that again. They feel guilty when they heal, because suffering became familiar, struggle became familiar, chaos became familiar, and when peace finally arrives, part of them doesn't trust it. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. Life becomes quiet for a few days. Nothing goes wrong. No conflict, no drama, no emergency. And suddenly your mind starts searching for problems. Not because problems exist, because your nervous system became addicted to preparing for them. This is one of the hidden consequences of surviving difficult seasons. You become so skilled at surviving danger that safety feels suspicious. But chosen one, you cannot build your future from a state of constant emotional defense. You cannot receive new blessings while expecting old disasters. Eventually, healing requires a new level of courage. The courage to believe life can become different. The courage to stop identifying with pain. The courage to stop defining yourself by what happened to you. That may be the hardest challenge of all, because pain can become part of identity. People begin introducing themselves through their wounds, their betrayals, their disappointments, their trauma, their failures. And while those experiences matter, they are not the whole story. You are not the worst thing that happened to you. You are not the heartbreak. You are not the rejection. You are not the abandonment. You are not the mistake. You are not the season that nearly broke you. You are the person who survived it. There is a difference, a powerful difference. One keeps you trapped in the past. The other reminds you of your strength. And strength is not what most people think. Strength isn't emotional numbness. Strength isn't pretending nothing hurts. Strength isn't carrying everything alone. Real strength is the willingness to remain open after disappointment, to remain kind after betrayal, to remain hopeful after loss, to remain authentic in a world that rewards performance. That kind of strength changes lives, but it comes at a cost. You will outgrow people. You will outgrow conversations. You will outgrow environments. And sometimes, you will outgrow parts of yourself. That last one is the hardest, because we naturally become attached to who we've been, even when that version is suffering. Even when that version is exhausted, even when that version is no longer aligned, we cling to old identities because they feel familiar. Yet life keeps moving, and eventually life asks a question that cannot be ignored. Are you willing to release who you were to become who you are? Notice the wording, not who you want to become, who you are. Because your future self is not something you create from scratch. It is something you uncover, piece by piece, layer by layer, truth by truth, until all that's left is what was real from the beginning. Chosen one, there is another reason you've been feeling different lately, and it has nothing to do with spirituality. It has everything to do with honesty. You are becoming incapable of lying to yourself. That's what maturity really is. Not age, not experience. Honesty, the ability to see reality without distortion. The ability to admit what no longer works. The ability to recognize when a chapter has ended. The ability to stop romanticizing things that hurt you. The ability to acknowledge when you've changed. And perhaps that's exactly what's happening now. You are finally seeing clearly the relationships, the habits, the fears, the dreams, the patterns, the truths you've avoided, the truths you've sensed for years. And clarity is beautiful, but clarity is also expensive, because once you see clearly, you become responsible for what you know. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer unsee. You can no longer return to unconscious living, which means a decision is approaching, a decision every chosen one must eventually make. Will you honor the person you are becoming, or will you return to the comfort of who you've been? That decision rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens in small moments. A boundary you finally set, a conversation you finally have, a door you finally close, a dream you finally pursue, a truth you finally accept. Tiny decisions, massive consequences, and whether you realize it or not, those moments are arriving, closer than you think. Because something is changing beneath the surface of your life, something that has been preparing itself quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. And in part 3, we're going to talk about the moment every chosen one eventually reaches. The moment where loneliness transforms into purpose, where separation reveals its meaning, where the silence finally explains itself, and where you discover why everything had to fall apart before your real life could begin.